The last thing Jonathan Red expected when he agreed to a weekend date was to find himself standing in a sunlit kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina, holding a flower-covered toddler while a golden retriever circled his feet and someone's grandmother hummed an old hymn in the background. He had said yes to one dinner, one polite evening to prove to himself he was still capable of trying. He did not expect to feel something crack open inside his chest. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that sometimes love finds you when you least expect it, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Jonathan had built his life carefully, like a house with no extra rooms. At 36, he lived alone in a small apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the walls were bare except for a single framed photo of his parents on the day he graduated college. His father, Robert, had passed away from a sudden heart attack 3 years earlier. His mother, Elaine, followed within a year, worn down by grief and illness. They had been his only family. No siblings, no cousins he kept in touch with, no loud holiday gatherings. Just 3 chairs at a dining table that now only seated one. He filled his days with work at an architecture firm, sketching dream homes for families who argued about paint colors and backyard sizes. He listened as clients talked about their children, their pets, their future Christmas mornings. He smiled and nodded, but when he returned home, the silence pressed in so heavily that sometimes he left the television on just to simulate company. He told himself he preferred it that way. Quiet meant control. Quiet meant no one could leave. It was his co-worker, Marcus, who finally nudged him into downloading a dating app. Just one date, Marcus had said. You don't have to marry her. Just remember you're still alive. Jonathan had rolled his eyes, but that night he created a profile with a hesitant photo and a short bio that described him as someone who liked black coffee and early morning walks. That was how he matched with Rebecca Collins. Rebecca's profile photo was simple. She stood in front of a lighthouse on the South Carolina coast, wind in her auburn hair, laughing at something outside the frame. Her bio mentioned that she loved Sunday dinners, road trips, and volunteering at her church. There was warmth in her words, a sense of someone rooted in something steady. They messaged for a week. She asked about his favorite buildings. He asked about her job as a second-grade teacher in Charleston. When she suggested he drive down for a weekend and explore the historic district together, his first instinct was to say no. It felt like too much, too fast. But something about her tone easy, open made him pause. So he surprised himself and said yes. The drive from Charlotte to Charleston took a little over 3 hours. Jonathan gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, rehearsing small talk in his mind. He expected an awkward dinner, maybe a polite hug goodbye. He certainly did not expect to be invited to Sunday lunch with her family. Rebecca had met him outside a small cafe near Rainbow Row. In person, she was softer than her photos suggested, her smile gentler. They spent Saturday wandering cobblestone streets, ducking into bookstores, talking about everything from childhood memories to the fear of losing people you love. When he briefly mentioned his parents, her expression shifted not to pity, but to understanding. She told him she had lost her older brother, Thomas, in a car accident when she was in college. Grief recognized grief. On Sunday morning, as they walked along the waterfront, she hesitated before speaking. She told him her family had a standing tradition, lunch at her parents' house every Sunday after church. She said he didn't have to come, that she understood if it was too soon. Jonathan surprised himself again. He said he would go. Her parents' house stood beneath tall oak trees draped in Spanish moss, a wide porch stretching across the front. The moment they stepped inside, he was hit with the scent of roasted chicken and fresh bread. Laughter spilled from the dining room. It was loud, chaotic, alive. Rebecca's mother, Patricia, hugged her daughter first, then extended a flour-dusted hand to Jonathan before pulling him into a hug anyway. Her father, Harold, shook his hand with a firm grip and a grin that made Jonathan feel as if had been expected all along. There was also Rebecca's younger sister, Megan, who was balancing a baby on her hip, and a little boy named Caleb who darted between legs with a toy truck. Jonathan felt like an intruder in someone else's warmth. He stood awkwardly near the kitchen counter until Caleb collided with him and demanded to know if he could build the biggest house ever. It was such an unexpected question that Jonathan laughed, a full, unguarded laugh he hadn't heard from himself in years. Soon he found himself on the living room floor, sketching a grand castle on a scrap of paper while Caleb and the baby whose name was Sofa watched in awe. Patricia called him to taste the gravy. Harold asked about his work. Megan handed him Sophie while she grabbed plates. Without warning, Jonathan was holding a giggling toddler, her tiny fingers tugging at his shirt as if he belonged there. He kept waiting for the feeling to fade, for the discomfort to set in. Instead, something inside him loosened. The noise didn't feel overwhelming. It felt full. The clatter of dishes, the overlapping conversations, the easy teasing it was messy, imperfect, real. He realized he had spent 3 years protecting himself from exactly this. During lunch, Harold bowed his head and thanked God for family, for new friends at the table, for unexpected blessings. Jonathan swallowed hard. He hadn't been part of a prayer circle since his mother's last Thanksgiving. When everyone reached for hands, Rebecca's fingers slipped into his. Her grip was steady, warm, grounding. After the meal, they sat on the porch as the afternoon sun dipped lower. Patricia brought out peach cobbler. Caleb insisted Jonathan push him on the porch swing. Sophie fell asleep against his shoulder, her soft breaths warming his neck. He didn't realize he was crying until Rebecca gently brushed a tear from his cheek. He hadn't meant to break down. But as he watched this family move around one another with effortless love, the grief he had buried for years rose to the surface. He confessed that he missed the noise of his own home, the way his mother used to hum while cooking, the way his father would argue about football scores. He admitted that after they were gone, he convinced himself it was easier not to want anyone, because wanting meant risking that kind of loss again. Rebecca didn't offer easy answers. She simply listened. She told him that loving again was always a risk, but living without love was a different kind of loss. She said her family wasn't perfect, that they fought and stumbled, but they chose each other every day. And she said he was welcome anytime and not as a guest, but as someone who mattered. As the sky turned pink over Charleston Harbor, Jonathan realized the weekend had changed something fundamental in him. He had arrived bracing for disappointment. Instead, he found himself imagining future Sundays, future laughter, future arguments over gravy recipes. He saw Caleb growing taller, Sophie taking her first steps. He saw himself not at the edge of the room, but at the center of it. When he drove back to Charlotte that evening, his apartment felt different. The silence was still there, but it no longer felt permanent. It felt temporary, like a pause before something new. He placed his parents' photo on the kitchen table instead of the wall and sat down across from it. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was betraying their memory by moving forward. He felt like he was honoring the love they had given him by allowing himself to receive it again. Over the next few months, he returned to Charleston often. He didn't rush anything with Rebecca. They let their relationship grow slowly, like roots deepening beneath soil. But each visit stitched him more firmly into the fabric of her family. Harold began asking his advice about a porch renovation. Patricia sent him home with leftovers. Caleb started calling him whenever he wanted to design another biggest house ever. And one Sunday, Sophie toddled across the living room straight into his arms. Jonathan realized that family wasn't always about blood. Sometimes it was about showing up. Sometimes it was about saying yes to a weekend date even when fear told you to stay home. If this story has touched your heart so far, take a moment right now to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we're never as alone as we think. And before we finish, I have a special request. Comment the word home below if you believe family can be found in unexpected places. A year later, Jonathan stood on that same Charleston porch, but this time with a small velvet box in his pocket. The oak trees swayed gently overhead, and the house behind him buzzed with familiar laughter. When he asked Rebecca to marry him, it wasn't just a proposal to her. It was a promise to choose this life, this noise, this beautiful chaos every single day. He had said yes to a weekend date. He hadn't known he was saying yes to healing, yes to belonging, yes to a family that would fill the empty rooms of his heart with light. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Brave yes to change everything.